watching Gearz, brought to you by LMC Truck. Restore, maintain, customize.
Hey, welcome to Gearz. You know, a few weeks ago, we rolled in this old 1967 Mercury Cougar, started disassembling it to see what we had. What we found was a pretty solid car that spent most of its life in California. Wow, gotta love a Sawzall. This week, we're going to start transforming it into a project called the V8 Interceptor, which is kind of fitting for a Cougar, since out in the wild, that's what a Cougar does. Runs things down and eats them. So we want this car to be able to do the same thing, run things down and eat them. Now, figuratively speaking, of course. Now, a lot of people know that the Cougar and the Mustang are very similar. Matter of fact, there's a lot of parts that will interchange. So you might be wondering, yeah, why don't you do the more popular Mustang? Well, the simple answer is the Cougar is cooler. It's much more unique. It has its own racing heritage. And of course, there's a whole world of enthusiasts and parts and websites out there that will support you in building one of these things. So the idea behind the V8 Interceptor is to show you the incredible potential of the Mercury Cougar. Okay, if you're a Ford guy, you know that the biggest issue with a 60s Ford is room in the engine compartment, especially with a Mustang or a Cougar, because they were already small to start with. Then you've got these shock towers that protrude 5 inches on each side into the engine bay. Now, if you're running a small block engine, this is no big deal. But if you're gonna stick a big block in here, or one of the later 4.6 modular engines, you're gonna have all kinds of clearance problems. So for decades, people have been dreaming of some way to get rid of these shock towers. And now finally, 40 years after these cars were built, it's possible to do it. Check it out. This is our new suspension system from Total Cost Involved. Now you may be thinking, Total Cost Involved? Don't they do hot rod stuff? Yeah, they do. That's what I've got under the front and rear of the Rat Roaster. But they don't just do street rod suspensions. They also do performance muscle car suspensions. Take a look at this. You've got a heavy-duty front crossmember. You've got motor mounts for pretty much whatever engine you want to use. You have all kinds of bracketry. Then you've got preformed boxing plates to strengthen the frame where the crossmember is going to go. Then you've got polished stainless steel upper and lower control arms, a power rack and pinion unit, a polished front sway bar. Then, of course, you have dual adjustable coil-over shocks, and then they finish it off with these massive 13-inch Wilwood brakes with drilled and slotted rotors and 6-piston calipers. And, of course, everything is polished. This is a fantastic suspension, but we can't put any of this stuff on till we get that old junk off of there. So it's time to get dirty. For this project, all the front suspension has got to come off. The A-arms, the steering box, the steering column, everything. Also, don't forget, to an original restorer, these parts are valuable. So be sure to set them aside for your next trip to the swap meet. All right, with all the suspension stripped away, it is time to start cutting. But we're not just gonna get rid of these shock towers. No, we're also gonna get rid of these motor mount brackets here, the sway bar bracket there, even these strut rod support channels, everything. So, we're gonna break out the plasma cutter.
And now, Tool Tech.
Some of the main questions that we get about a plasma cutter are, how does it compare to other cutting tools, and do I really need one? Well, take a look at this. A plasma cutter will not only cut heavy steel like this, it'll also cut frames and brackets and angle iron. It'll cut tubing. It'll even cut sheet metal. So it will basically do what all of these other cutting tools will do, but in some cases even better. Take a look. This is a heavy steel frame that was cut with an oxyacetylene torch. Now notice how rough and nasty that cut is. Now here's the same frame that was cut on this side with a plasma cutter. No, notice the difference. Now on this side of the frame, we made that cut with a bandsaw. Now notice that the plasma cutter is almost as precise as the bandsaw, except the plasma cutter is a lot quicker, and thanks to the small size of these new extreme plasma cutters, this will go just about anywhere you want and has the power to cut what you need. When precision and control and accuracy are important in your cuts, that's when a plasma cutter really shines. Trying to make these kind of cuts with a cut-off wheel or a sawzall would be extremely tough. With a plasma cutter, it's like drawing a line on a piece of paper. So, does a plasma cutter replace all of these other cutting tools? No, because there is a time and a place to use every one of these tools. Just like there's a time and a place that you're gonna need a plasma cutter. And fortunately, Miller's got a whole line of them to fit just about any budget, which is a good thing, because once you use one of these things, you are gonna be amazed what you can do with one. Hey, welcome back to Gearz, where today we are digging into a project called the V8 Interceptor. And the car on the chopping block is a '67 Mercury Cougar. Now, as you can see, there is a lot missing off the front of this car. We've got a whole pile of parts that we unbolted and a whole pile of parts that we cut off. And I know a lot of you guys are thinking that we have just destroyed a really nice car. But there's a method to the madness. Come on. All right, the point here was to cut out everything, get down to the bare frame, and basically start over, which is something that Mustang and Cougar owners have been wanting to do for decades. Now, as you can see, with these shock towers gone, you've got all kinds of room in here to stuff in any kind of big block or a modular engine and still have plenty of room to spare. But this project is not just about getting more room into the engine compartment. No, it's also about sticking a state-of-the-art front suspension on this thing so it'll really handle on the street and on the track. Now, as you can see, we have a completely rust-free front end under this thing, which is great. Because if you've got rusty frame rails, you've got to replace those before you can go any further. Now, obviously, we have cut out a lot of metal here and a lot of strength with it. This thing's as flimsy as a potato chip right now. So the first thing we need to do is build some more strength back in here, which means it's time to start putting stuff on. To get the strength back into this frame area, Total Cost Involved supplies these boxing plates. They just slide onto the frame, and then they're just mocked in place with a bolt through a factory hole. Now, when you go to weld these things on, the idea is not just to weld the boxing plates together. What you want to do is sink the weld deep enough to where it gets into the original frame. And by welding those three pieces together, this is going to be incredibly strong. Once everything is clamped in place, square and secure, weld in the three slots on the plate. This ties the boxing plates to the frame. Next, weld the outside of the boxing plates to the frame. And make sure to keep your weld beads short and move around so you don't build up too much heat and warp the steel. Once the side boxing plates are done, the bottom boxing plate's next, and it goes on the same way. With all your welding done, grab a grinder, smooth everything out, and make it look good. Okay, once all your boxing plates are welded in place and everything's ground down nice and smooth, now you are ready for this massive cross member, because this is what all of this new suspension is going to bolt to. Now, as you can see, Total Cost Involved has already welded in the mounts for the rack and pinion, the lower control arms, the motor mounts, everything. So all you have to be concerned about is getting this thing in place. Now, it's not that hard. Take a look here. All you do is slide it up against these locating brackets and clamp it in place. Once it's in, spend a few minutes checking your measurements to make sure everything is square and where it's supposed to be. If it's not, now's the time to fix it. Then, when you're happy with the fit, weld it in. The next piece to go on is the upper A-arm shock tower brackets. Now, they come with alignment holes, so you can't get them in wrong. So once you have them in place, clamp them down and weld them up. All right, the final piece to go on are these brackets that hold the front sway bar. Now, as you can see, they've got little ears and tabs to support the sides and the bottom. And they just slide 12 inches in front of the cross member. Then you just clamp it in place and weld them up. Hey, we're back, and deep in the middle of a total revamp of the front suspension on this '67 Mercury Cougar. And the good news is, you can do exactly the same thing with a classic Mustang or a Fairlane. Now, so far, this build-up's been pretty intense. We've cut out a lot of old stuff, welded in a lot of new stuff. And a lot of you are probably wondering just exactly where this thing is gonna go. Well, you're about to find out, because now it is time to install this TCI system. And we're gonna start with these lower control arms. Now, as you can see, these are not only completely polished, but they've also got the ball joints and the bushings already installed. So all we have to do is bolt these guys in. The coilover shocks are next, and they simply bolt to the shock towers and the lower control arm. Now, like we said before, these are dual adjustable coilovers that will allow you to really dial in the performance of your suspension. The upper control arms also bolt in place using the supplied hardware, and the kit comes with plenty of shims to take care of your alignment. Now, as you may recall, these spindle and brake assemblies come from Total Cost Involved, completely assembled with massive Wilwood brakes. And with a 13-inch rotor and a 6-piston calipers, stopping that car is not going to be a problem. Now, since they're already buttoned up, the bearings are all greased and ready to go, all you have to do is put them on the ball joints and bolt them on. All right, the original steering setup on these cars came through a steering box, which is one of the reasons why these cars wander all over the road, especially as they get older. So, we're changing that. We are putting on a power rack and pinion unit, which is going to give us much better steering, much more precise. Now, at this point, all we have to do is bolt the rack onto the cross member and connect our new tie rod ends to the spindles. Of course, any performance car needs a sway bar to control body lean during hard cornering. And this system comes with a polished sway bar, bushings, brackets, and adjustable end links. And once again, everything just bolts in place. Okay, the final pieces that come with this kit are these flat sheet metal panels, and these are designed to slide right down in here and bolt in place and cover up all this opening, so you got a nice smooth finish inside the engine compartment. And we'll put those on as soon as we finish all this up. Now, as far as your steering column, you don't want to mess around with an old stock steering column, not when there's a company like I Did It out there that has a tilt column that is designed to bolt right in place of your stock column in your old Mustang or Cougar. Now look at this, you've got the piece that goes to the firewall, you got your turn signal levers, you've got your electrical hookups, and they will plug right into a painless wiring harness, which is also designed to plug right into a vintage Ford. So that's a great combination. Now, to connect that steering column to the rack and pinion, I Did It also carries these Borgeson stainless steel U-joints and this double D shaft, so hookups won't be a problem. Now, to finish off our brakes, we also got this Wilwood dual master cylinder and this really unique proportioning valve. Now look at this, it's a proportioning valve, a metering block, even has your brake light switch, all in one nice little package. Now, I know you're wondering, what engine is gonna go in this thing? And you think you know, but you don't. But I'll give you a hint. There's the motor mounts that go with it. And if that's not a big enough clue, well, maybe the crate is.
Now, Quick Tip. Brought to you by E3 Spark Plugs. Born to burn.
Today's Quick Tip deals with an age-old problem when it comes to vehicle maintenance. That's getting transmission fluid into the transmission. Now, this is an issue because the transmission fill tube is little and narrow, and it's usually tied up against a firewall or against the engine or in some hard-to-reach place. So we usually rig up something like this. Now that's fine, but that will also allow you to spill fluid all over the engine and the floor and the transmission everywhere. There's a better way to do it than this. And it involves making a trip down to your local drugstore and picking up an enema bottle. Now what you do is fill the bottle with your transmission fluid and hang it up. Now as you can see, the outlet tube is plenty small enough to fit right into the transmission fill tube. Then you just open the clamp and allow gravity to fill your transmission with exactly the amount of fluid you need. Then when you're done, you just close up the clamp and you have filled your transmission without spilling a drop. Now, I do recommend that if you use this tip, that you keep your bottle in the garage so nobody accidentally, uses it the other way. Now, if you would like to learn more tips that will help you out in the shop, go to the tips page on the website.
Parts Bin. Brought to you by Cherry Bomb. Disturbing the peace since 1968.
You know, if you watch Gearz very much, you know I love to show new tools because tools give you the means to build stuff. And there's always new tools coming out. But once in a while, a tool comes out that's so good, it's hard to improve on. Case in point, the Dake J-Saw. This is a horizontal bandsaw that Dake has been making virtually unchanged since the 1940s. And when you check it out, it's easy to see why. A heavy-duty clamping system allows you to hold metal plate or tubing or whatever in place, while a slow-moving, well-lubricated bandsaw slices it cleanly. The saw has a hydraulic control that allows you to dial in how fast the head drops so you don't kill the saw blade before it's time. And the unique design allows you to easily make cuts that would be very difficult with any other type of saw. You know, it's one thing to restore something from the World War II era. It's quite another to find something that works just as well today as it did 70 years ago. And if you need to cut metal, the Dake J-Saw is one of the best investments that you can make. Most people understand how important oil changes are to the life of their engine. But a lot of people will turn right around and completely overlook a periodic oil change in a transmission or a rear end. And these are just as important. Fortunately, Royal Purple has got some synthetic lubes to help you out there. They got transmission fluid and they've got gear oil. And since these are synthetics, they're going to last longer, they're going to keep temperatures down, they're going to lubricate better, and they are going to reduce wear and tear. And that all becomes really important when you realize how expensive it is to replace this stuff. So if you want your big components to last as long as your engine, Royal Purple can help you do that. Everybody knows that chrome and polished metal looks good, but it is possible to have too much of it. That's why a lot of people are blacking out some of their polished metal. But the problem is black chrome is expensive and usually required a trip to the chrome shop. Until now, check it out. This is Duplicolor's new paint called Shadow Paint, and it's designed to give you the look of black chrome at a fraction of the cost. Now, the application's very simple. You just clean the surface to get all the grease and grime off. Then shoot on the translucent black base coat. Now, the more coat you put on, the darker it's gonna get. Then finally, finish it off with the clear top coat to give it that deep shine. Now, as you can see, the translucent black over the chrome base gives you a depth and a reflection that you just can't get any other way. The best part is, though, this shadow paint is resistant to brake dust, chipping, abrasion, even temperature up to 250 degrees, which means you can use this on everything from wheels to exhaust tips, and you don't have to worry about it chipping off in a few months. So if you like the look of black chrome, you need to make a call to Duplicolor.
What are you working on? Brought to you by Miller Electric, the leading manufacturer of arc welding and cutting equipment for your business or home shop.
You know, the cool thing about the What Are You Working On segment is that we get to feature all kinds of vehicles because not everybody is into the same thing. Case in point, this one comes from Ryan Holloway from Jacksonville, Missouri, and his project is an '84 Ford F-350. Take a look at it. Yeah, now that is not the typical vehicle that you would expect somebody to be into. But Ryan picked it up for two reasons. Number one, he liked it. Number two, he needed it. Yeah, he drove it just like it is for a few years. Then he started to tear it apart. Now take a look at this. He stripped off the bed, stripped down the frame. You can see here where he painted the rear end, took care of that. Then he started working on the cab. Now take a look at this. As you can see, there were some cab corners that needed to be replaced, some rust needed to be taken care of. Then of course they painted the truck, and then Ryan did the interior and rebuilt the engine. Now one of the unique things about this story is that Ryan doesn't have a garage, but he's worked out a special deal with his wife. Now listen to this. He said that she's been sweet enough to let me spread my work out on the living room floor as long as I clean it up every night before I go to bed. Oh man, that would never work for me, man. My misses are way too big. But Ryan, I'm glad it works for you. Now to help you out with this project and for your next ones, we are gonna give you one of these leather Miller welding jackets. And you probably ought to give it to your wife for putting up with your mess. Now, if the rest of you guys want to get in on this, all you got to do is go to staceydavid.com and submit your What Are You Working On, and we'll do the best that we can to get it on the air. But you got to include pictures of you working on the project. All right, that takes care of it today. Got a lot of work to do on the Cougar, and I know you've got something that you got to go work on. So I'll see you next week.